Well, good evening and welcome to the regular city council meeting for April 17, 2023. Please stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call?
Noack. Here. Wren,
Here.
Chess,
Here.
Vincent,
Here.
Flaherty.
Here. So before we proceed with our agenda items, let me just remind you how you could participate tonight. You can obviously be here in person, as many of you are, and you're welcome. You could also join us by Zoom, at www.zoom.us. The instructions are on the screen. Click join a meeting, enter the meeting ID and passcode. The meeting ID is 828-6954-8975. The passcode 485798. You could also reach us by dialing 669-900-6833. Council had a closed session just preceding this session, and calling the city attorney to give us a report on the closed session.
Thank you. Yes, the council voted unanimously to authorize the city manager to execute a settlement agreement in the nationwide opioid settlement. This is with Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, Teva, and Allergan. And that settlement agreement will be executed by tomorrow.
Thank you. We're going to move to agenda item 5.1, presentations. We have proclamations recognizing Paula Bartow as Police Professional Staff Member of the Year and Andrew Mundy as Police Officer of the Year 2022. Call on Chief Vermillion to get us going here.
Good evening, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Wren, and council members and members of the community that are here personally or those joining us virtually. First and foremost, I wanted to thank you all for your continued support for the police department and for your support in tonight's presentation, where we get to acknowledge exceptional valor and service to the community by two of our employees. Your continued support and the community support is truly valued by the police department. In my opinion, there is a tougher job in America than serving in the law enforcement profession. This was true in the past, and it is even truer now. Having a supportive community makes a difference. It makes a difference in morale, reinforcing our purpose and what we do. It also makes a difference in hiring and retention. As law enforcement officers and employees of the Pleasant Hill Police Department, we know the support we receive is not unconditional. It comes with expectations that are necessary. Some of those expectations are that we treat all members of the community with dignity and respect, and that we utilize best practices designed to promote effective crime reduction while building public trust. So before I introduce our recipients, I would like to briefly explain one important component of the selection process for Officer of the Year and Professional Staff Member of the Year. It starts with nominations from peers and direct supervisors, and not that of administrators or command staff. In addition, only employees below the rank of sergeant are eligible to be nominated and selected. The purpose of this is because they are the police department's frontline, forward-facing employees that serve the community 24 hours a day. So with that, I am honored to introduce our professional staff member for the year of 2022 is Dispatcher Paula Bartow.
Just wanted to say thank you. I'm very humbled by this, and it's really great to work at a wonderful police department, a very cohesive group. Very nice people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you don't get to leave
I'll tell
just
you a
yet.
little bit about her, and then Mayor Flaherty, thank you very much. Originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Dispatcher Bartow is a veteran police dispatcher for our county. Prior to coming to Pleasant Hill, she worked as a dispatcher for the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department for 19 years. Dispatching is an extremely difficult job. When people are in need of emergency services, the first voice they often hear are that of our dispatchers. This extremely important position requires having people skills, possess and utilize high levels of effective communication, the ability to receive information, analyze it, and make fast decisions. The term overwatch is often used when deploying tactical units. It also can be used to describe our police dispatchers. They watch over the safety of the city and the safety of our officers. Throughout 2022, Dispatcher Bartow has reinforced her reputation as a dedicated and hardworking member of the dispatch team. Every time someone entered the communication center or came to the front counter, when she was working, they were met with a smile and a positive attitude. She's an extremely reliable dispatcher who remains calm on the radio while giving out clear and detailed information. Dispatcher Bartow has built great relationships with dispatchers from neighboring departments and is an outstanding representative of our agency. Sir?
And Ms. Bartow, there's more. Whereas each year, the Pleasant Hill Police Department selects an employee for Professional Staff Member of the Year, and whereas dispatcher Paula Bartow has been nominated by her peers and selected by the Department Nomination Committee and the Chief of Police to receive the prestigious Professional Staff Member of the Year award, and whereas dispatcher Paula Bartow has provided essential support to officers in the field or at the scene of a crime by handling emergency and non-emergency phone calls and radio traffic and dispatching needed resources. And whereas police dispatcher Paula Bartow's work always demonstrates a strong dedication to officer safety and safety of the public, exemplifying what a police dispatcher should be. And whereas Paula Bartow has shown a strong work ethic to include the processing of police reports where she routinely goes above and beyond what is expected of her. And whereas the efforts and contributions of police dispatcher Paula Bartow have been invaluable and have contributed to the success of the Pleasant Hill Police Department and the betterment of the community of Pleasant Hill. Now, therefore, I, Timothy M. Flaherty, Mayor of the City of Pleasant Hill, do hereby join with the entire City Council and staff to congratulate you for being chosen Professional Staff Member of the Year 2022.
He's gonna bring.
I'm always sitting behind these pictures. It's always photo bomb. I hate to have that be the case.
That's it.
There's software. There's software to remove people in the back.
Good. Mm.
Now on to our Officer of the Year, Detective Andrew Mundy. So when we hired Detective Mundy, there were several things that stood out that made him a viable candidate, and two were very notable. He is both a graduate from the University of Montana, and he is a veteran who served with the U.S. Army. In fact, didn't you take a break from college, serve, and then come back? So very, very good. However, even with that, there was one other thing that stood out in his background process during the hiring that exemplified why he would be a good addition to the Pleasant Hill Police Department. He grew up in Pleasant Hill. He is a native of Pleasant Hill, and that is awesome. Hired by the Pleasant Hill Police Department in July of 2019, he has served 2 different assignments in a short period of time, that being patrol and his current assignment as a detective in our Investigations Bureau. As part of the Investigations Bureau in 2022, Detective Mundy authored 150 search warrants. To put that in perspective, I am not exaggerating. In my 26-year career, I do not think I've come close to 150 search warrants. It's probably over 100, but it's definitely not 150, and he wrote that in 1 year. In addition, he had 115 arrests. For 2022, Detective Mundy was the primary detective assigned to 192 cases, and he was responsible for the recovery of $325,000 worth of stolen funds and property. Detective Mundy has an incredible work ethic and attention to detail and never shies away from work. He makes great use of various investigative tools to identify numerous suspects and solve cases. Some notable cases that Detective Mundy worked on in 2022 was a scam resulting in the loss of $320,000 to an elderly victim. He facilitated the freeze of the suspect's bank account and ultimately the return of all of the stolen funds. He also assisted in identifying and arresting both shooting suspects from the Pleasant Hill Oaks Park shooting. In addition to that, he identified the armed robbery suspect of a 7-Eleven store in Pleasant Hill, which included the involvement of the victim cashier who was in collusion with the suspect and staged the whole robbery. And lastly, he identified a suspect who stole 8 vehicles in Pleasant Hill as well. Detective Mundy worked with the patrol division regularly and proactively offered assistance and follow-up for cases when he became aware of them. Sir?
Thank you. I have a City of Pleasant Hill proclamation. Whereas Detective Andrew Mundy has been nominated by his peers and selected by the Department Nomination Committee and the Chief of Police to receive the prestigious Officer of the Year award. And whereas Detective Andrew Mundy's professionalism, hard work, and dedication to the safety of our community was and remains vital to the mission of our police department. And whereas your outstanding work on difficult and complex investigations benefited the police department and every citizen of Pleasant Hill. And whereas your efforts and contributions have been invaluable and contributed to the success of the Pleasant Hill Police Department and the betterment of the community of Pleasant Hill. There's lots more whereases, but the pages actually, but the chief hit on most of them. So I'm just going to get to the good part. Now, therefore, I, Timothy M. Flaherty, Mayor of the City of Pleasant Hill, do hereby join with the entire City Council and staff to congratulate Detective Andrew Mundy for being chosen Officer of the Year 2022. Amazing. Others in the audience, let's all give her.
Come on.
A few words.
There you go. Thank you very much. This is quite an honor for me. I just want to take the opportunity to quickly thank my family, friends, and neighbors who are in the audience tonight. Been a big supporter of me my whole life. Part of the reason I'm here. And thank you all and all of our administrators at Pleasant Hill Police. It's an excellent place to work, and I've had a great career so far. Look forward to several more years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. We're going to move to item 5.2. We have a proclamation designating April as Arab American Heritage Month. Carson Sprott, the acting chair for the Diversity Commission.
They might as well, please all go.
Come on forward.
And the crowd empties. out.
Carson, why don't I read a few excerpts from the proclamation and then turn it over to you?
Yes, sir.
Whereas for over a century, Arab Americans have been making valuable contributions to virtually every aspect of American society in science, medicine, law, business, education, technology, government, military service, and culture. And whereas since migrating to America, people of Arab descent have shared their rich culture and traditions with neighbors and friends, while also setting examples of model citizens and public servants. Whereas Arab Americans bring with them to America their resilient family values, strong and diligent work ethic, peaceful ideals, and diversity in faith and creed that have strengthened the community. Whereas Arab American issues such as civil rights abuses and bullying must be combated in the forms of education and awareness. Whereas Arab American Heritage Month is an opportunity to celebrate the great pride and vibrancy of Arab Americans in Pleasant Hill and the Bay Area, whose abilities and contributions strengthen California's economy, diverse culture, and communities. And whereas the city of Pleasant Hill will join the nation in observing April as Arab American Heritage Month by honoring the essential contributions, sacrifices, and accomplishments of Arab Americans. Now therefore, I, Timothy M. Flaherty, Mayor of the City of Pleasant Hill, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Arab American Heritage Month in the City of Pleasant Hill and call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens and residents. Thank you. I'm going to come down and hand this to you. Have a photo op. There you go. All right. Thank you, sir. Back to you, Carson.
Your Honor, members of the City Council, and to the community tonight, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you from myself and from the Diversity Commission for this proclamation. And thank you for recognizing the important contributions of Arab Americans to our families, to our city, and to our country. Having served with Arab Americans in combat zones overseas, I have become familiar with the values you described. I couldn't say it any better, sir. Thank you for that. Arab Americans serve vital roles in our universities, in our armed forces, in our economy, and our families. Personally, they make an important part of my own family as well. Abu Hassan, miss you. Thanks to everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service on the Diversity Commission. Item 5.3 is the Contra Costa Fire Protection District update. I'm sorry, Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal Chris Bachman, please come forward. I have no proclamation or award to give you, but you are equally deserving.
Hey, do you have the presentation we can start up on the screen for online?
Thank you for looking at me, but no.
He's of no help.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Wren, and council members, residents that are both here in public and online. Thank you for the attention this evening. Provide this update. We typically do this twice a year. Give you an update about what's new going on with Confire and answer any questions you may have about your fire department. On behalf of Fire Chief Louis Bouchard and all our firefighters and support staff, thank you for allowing us to be your fire department and provide you these updates. Next slide. So your fire department at a glance, we are a countywide fire and rescue service. We're one of the largest special districts in California, and we are dedicated to preserving the residents' life and property throughout Contra Costa County. You'll notice this map shows all of our station locations. We are now up to 34 stations throughout Contra Costa County. Next slide. So a little bit about our district, our crew, and our facilities. We have over 500 employees, 34 fire stations, 37 emergency crews, a fleet of 250 specialized vehicles, specialized programs, and we are expanding our service area, which included the expansion of Pinole just a little over a month ago on March 1st. Some of our programs include ambulance transport, aviation, Crew 12, the fire dozer program, fire investigation, hazmat, health and wellness. We recently added a canine search and arson dog, our marine program, rescue, UAV, which is also drones, known as drones, and FEMA urban search and rescue. Next slide. So what's new in Contra Costa County Fire? Since we last spoke, we have added East Con Fire annexation that was done in July of last year. And then on March 1st, we started serving Pinole and West County with 2 additional fire stations, 73 and 74, which included opening a closed station in Pinole. So now we're operating out of 2 stations in Pinole rather than just 1. Crew 12 is a countywide resource, which also now offers year-round resources and availability to our crew. We used to just staff Crew 12 during what we called our fire season, but now it's a 12-month resource that we utilize in the off-season, working on mitigation projects to reduce our fuel loads and clean up evacuation routes and do chipping days throughout the county. We've also created a resident wildfire mitigation program. This is funded by Measure X. We manage it for the entire county. It is open to any county fire department to support and all of our Contra Costa County residents. There's a portal we encourage people to go to. You go to our webpage, you'll see the tab up in the upper left-hand corner called Contra Costa County Wildfire Mitigation Program. And there's over $1 million in projects that we fund throughout the year throughout Contra Costa County to reduce our fuel load and focus on mitigation projects to make the residents and our county safer and more prepared for wildfires. Fire stations 486 and 95 opened last year. These were new fire stations, along with construction plans for 3 new stations are currently underway. One of them is Station 9 and the other 2 are out in East County. Safer Grant has added additional resources and crews to Battalion 8 and 9 in 2023. We have another crew that was just staffed out in East County, Engine 90 out of Station 92. So now that station is operating as a dual company station. We've increased that staffing now to 5 different companies operating out of that battalion rather than 3 just a year ago. Safer, the K9 program, I mentioned that earlier. We now have a K9 accelerant dog. Baxter joins our team. Our fire prevention captain went out to the East Coast to Virginia and was trained through a 6-week program as a certified handler. And he's now a national or regional resource with the ATF and a valuable resource that we use almost weekly whenever we have any working fire and there's a need for the dog to determine if the accelerant's involved. We have that resource available now. Next slide. So this is overview in the first quarter of 2023, what the total responses look like. And if you look at the upper left-hand corner of the slide, you'll see that it just shows over the last 6 years, the increase in the first 3 months of what we're seeing that we're running in Pleasant Hill. And we're seeing this throughout the county. Your city is no different. It's just the increase in population, the increase call volume that we're experiencing really throughout the county, but just gives you an idea of our call volume increase along with the types of calls that we typically run. The pie chart in the middle where that says 590, that is just for the month of March. So everything else is related to the first quarter, but the breakdown does identify for the month of March. And if we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see that better. So this is kind of a typical snapshot of what we see monthly in Pleasant Hill as far as the types of calls that we run and our total number. So for March, we ran 590. If you go back for the last 12 months, to give you an idea, we ran 6,963 calls. The one number that is relatively low on the pie chart currently because of this time of year is the vegetation fires, but I did pull out those statistics to give you an update of what those numbers were. So in 2022 for vegetation fires, there were 79 exterior fires in Pleasant Hill, of which there was, in all of those fires, your largest fire was less than 1 acre in size. So they were all relatively small. We were able to keep them that way, but we did run 79 of them. And of those, the number of that 79 that was related to transients being involved was 25, and one of those was related to fireworks. In 2021, the number was 49 total exterior fires with 13 related to transients and 3 related to fireworks. So we did see a slight increase. We do share these numbers regularly with the city manager and our police chief, along with anytime we have a significant incident report. I'm the liaison for the city. I'm usually providing a text and an email and updates as far as what's occurring and any second alarm fire or greater to provide the city notification so they're aware of large fires that are going on in the community. Next slide. This is a breakdown in the first quarter of the EMS calls that we run. And if you look at first quarter, you'll see that our total EMS calls was 739. And same thing when you look at the chart, you can see kind of month to month our call volume, how it increases, what our typical response time is, and time to get back in service and time at the hospital, along with the chart in the bottom identifies where those EMS calls are occurring. Next slide. So the wildfire threat, it has become longer, less predictable, and the trend continues. The one thing that we know this year is it's just going to probably occur later because of the amount of rain we've had. The disadvantage with that is we know that our grasses and all those fuel loads have tremendous growth right now. So although when they're very green, if we start to get the drought that we typically get during the summer, we know that our grasses and light flashy fuels will dry out, and that's when our risk really increases. There's no area throughout Contra Costa County that's really immune to this danger if you look at the different zones. So we want to encourage our residents to make sure that they're looking at the wildfire mitigation program projects for consideration, along with the residents guide to prepare and make sure that they are prepared for evacuation if necessary. If you go to the next slide, I can identify a little better about the changing wildfire threat and the zones in Pleasant Hill. So there's a minimal wildfire threat within the city limits of Pleasant Hill, but if you'll notice, you are surrounded on both sides by threat zones. And the concerns we have with that, of course, is Embercast. So although it may not be right in your city, we know that from some of our large fires that have occurred throughout the state that it is common that Embercast can spread those fires up to a mile away from where the fire is. So that's why we want to encourage our residents to make sure that they've done their part, they're ready, their house, they've done their protection with defensible space, and that if they need to evacuate, they're prepared to do so. And we asked them, you can view this map on a live thread map, which is at Confire at CCC Wildfire Threat. There's a QR code. There's also a QR code at the very end of this presentation, which will have all these resources that someone can scan to pull up any of this information I'm presenting. Next slide. One new valuable evacuation tool that's been in place for a couple of years is called Zone Haven. So we want to make sure that we're passing this on to the community, that everyone knows your zone. It provides real-time evacuation information for our residents if an evacuation is necessary. And we spent months identifying each and every zone in all these cities. And in the city of Pleasant Hill, like our other cities, the police department was crucial in providing that information and helping identify those necessary zones tied to evacuation roads and evacuation routes that we've used in the past. So all those zones were well thought out. So we're encouraging our residents to make sure they know their zones and that they have signed up for the alerts through the CWS system. You can go to CWS Alerts, Know Your Zone to get more information on this. But if you're in an area that is going to be evacuated, provided a warning, you'll get an alert through CWS if you've signed up for that. And it's going to identify the zones that are in warning and the zones that we're currently evacuating. If you know your zone, this is going to be beneficial because you'll be able to identify that maybe if zone 4 is getting evacuated, that may be a mile away from you, or then again, that may be the next zone to where you live. So it'll provide you critical information as far as what areas we're evacuating and what areas we put in warning. Next slide. And last, we want to make sure that we're touching additional fire safety information for our residents. which is making sure that they are prepared if we have a structure fire or modern homes are burning much faster, hotter, and more toxic with the materials that are inside our homes today. So some of those simple steps are making sure we have working smoke detectors on all floors and in every bedroom. Carbon monoxide alarms are installed. We sleep with our bedroom doors closed, and we have a family evacuation plan. Next slide. So thank you for being able to provide an update for Contra Costa County Fire. You scan the QR code, it will provide all the references for all the maps and information that we provided in tonight's presentation. Do I have any questions?
I do have a question, Chief, just to follow up on, I think it was the grass fires. You had some statistics by transients. Do you have any statistics by PG&E caused fires? Whether blown transformer or down line that has caused some of the grass fires in Pleasant Hill?
So I do not have those totals. I mean, as far as an exact total, but I could give you, or I could share with you these details, so we break out a spreadsheet that we can provide that would show the exact details of all, was there 79, the 79 fires that you had. And each one of those would identify it tells the type of fire it is, the incident number, the date, the address in which it occurred, the number of resources that we sent to the scene, was an investigator called. There's a checkboxes of fireworks, transients, and then there's incident notes. So those incident notes would identify if it was a transformer or power, and then we could pull that full report if you'd want it. So because there's not very many, it would be very easy to go through that several page spreadsheet and identify what those numbers are. And I'll be happy to share last year, the year before. I know that in the last month, we've had throughout the county a lot of down power lines and transformers that we've been dealing with. But luckily, because everything was so green and it was raining, we were really just dealing with power outages and the hazard of down power lines. They weren't starting fires.
By calling out the number of transient caused fires, was that to indicate that's the largest block of caused fires, or that was just a fact?
No, it's just it's one of the metrics that we're tracking, and we actually have 2 fire inspectors in our community risk reduction division that we're out now going to our known areas where fires have occurred in the last several years. Like, we're evaluating through heat maps to educate the different encampments on the importance of, as we look through the notes, did these fires start because of cooking or warming fires? And if they did, how can we educate our residents to make sure that they're doing safe fire safety? They're using fire in a safe manner as well to prevent fires from getting out of control. And we have this information. We share it with our cities. We share it with the police departments, and we use it as an educational tool. 1, to the city, and 2, to then go out to those encampments and educate our residents to make sure that they're using safe fire practices as well.
Anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah,
Carol?
just,
Go ahead.
I had a question. I know a lot of the police forces in the county are having trouble hiring. What's the status for Confire? You guys fully staffed, or are you looking to recruit, or what?
We
what's the
are.
status?
We just finished a recruit class. We have which was able to provide that additional staffing that we currently did with our Engine 90. Along with, we have another recruit class getting ready to graduate. I believe it's in the middle of May, which will be additional resources that we'll be staffing up ready for summer. And that's the additional staffing that we're calling out that we'll be doing yet this year. So we've been kind of on pace with 2 academies every year for the last 3 or 4 years. And we continue to grow in size. We continue to fill all our vacancies, and we have not had any problems with recruitment or getting new firefighters to join our department.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
I mean, Chief, what would the biggest takeaway you want somebody to take away tonight from your presentation? If citizens would just do what to make the fire department's job easier or more beneficial, what would you want people to know that you wish that we could help change or help give direction for help you guys out?
I think it's the basic maintenance around your house and making sure, we like to refer to it as defensible space. And some of that maintenance is definitely includes the removal of the leaves, from your valleys on your roofs, in your gutters. As I mentioned earlier, although Pleasant Hill is not in that high threat area, that threat area is all around Pleasant Hill. And it would be very easy to take the circle and say, look at all the homes that are within a mile of where ember gas can come from. And that could create a lot of spot fires that we would have to deal with. Where if residents did that general maintenance, created that defensible space around your home, if we are faced with a large fire occurring in those threat zones, we're hoping that we don't have the spot fires a mile out in front of it from the way in the wind direction, because that defensible space and that property maintenance has been done with the vegetation.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. You meant, obviously we have residents that have signed up for the Nixle alerts. And I'm wondering with this Know Your Zone, is that linked in with that? If you're subscribed to Nixle alerts, would you get an evacuation notice that based on the Know Your Zone alert that you were talking about?
So the Nixle alerts are going to be ran through your police department. And anytime we're doing any type of evacuation, it's always done in conjunction with local law enforcement. So with the Contra Costa County Sheriff and with the City of Pleasant Hill Police Department being on scene, if we're doing a evacuation, we're going to identify the area we're evacuating by zone. And our first go-to is through the CWS alert system. The next step, if the city has something like that in place and the police department were to choose to push that alert out, that is definitely an option. But what we are making sure we encourage all residents to make sure that they have signed up for is the CWS alerts, which is through the county. Because if we're in Martinez or if we're in Lafayette and we're pushing an evacuation in one of those cities, but we're warning a zone in Pleasant Hill, it just by using that countywide system, it allows us to effectively communicate from city to city to all of our residents if a warning needs to be issued in the next city over.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal Bachman. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Move on to item 6, City Manager comments. Ms. Catalano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Postcards have been sent out to all the households in the city, alerting them to our various hearings on the districting proposals. And those postcards include information for contact information in traditional and simplified Chinese, Farsi, Spanish, Tagalog, Russian, Ukrainian, and Vietnamese. And if you haven't already received anything in your mailbox, hopefully you will receive something in the next few days. Also, we have had initial meetings with the Pacific Coast Farmers Market, and we're meeting again to discuss potential locations for return of the farmers market, which we hope will happen pretty soon. And also just to note that the Commission on Aging is asking residents aged 55 and over to please take a short survey on aging well. You can go to the Commission on Aging section of the Pleasant Hill website. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Catalano. Anyone have any questions or comments for the city manager? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move to item 7.1, reports from council members on meetings or conferences attended at city expense. Primarily the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference hosted by the City of Concord on April 6, 2023. I'm going to call on Councilmember Nowak, who wasn't there, to not report on this. So it was on transportation. That's why I was looking at you. Does anyone want to report on that meeting? All right.
I was there with Councilmember Chess. Lots of great things. I mean, Sue could do the presentation even though she wasn't there, but she drinks it and breathes it every day. But I will do my best to do that. But there's a lot of autonomous vehicle stuff going on, especially being tested at the Momentum station out in Concord. We had a presentation about some of the vehicles that are rolling out at Bishop Ranch. So it's really tying into the master plan and making our streets safer, hopefully more green and things like that. So it was really interesting to see the technology and where it's at and vehicles, autonomous vehicles being used, and smart roads and freeways based on sensors and traffic flows that will be able to tie into these smart vehicles to help control traffic much better and regulate that. So some really exciting stuff coming down the road here. And if you haven't been by, there's the old Concord Wave Station. This is all the buildings and roads out there. That's a perfect testing ground so they can do real live practice tests and real stuff like that. So a lot of big corporate partners in the area. It's a great thing for us to be kind of at the forefront of that and start rolling out that technology here. So I don't know. Councilmember Shesh, you want to add anything to that or?
No, I think that was pretty good. The one thing I would add to that was that just for people who have friends and relatives in Rossmore, they are going to start doing a shuttle with an autonomous vehicle, taking them from if you know the area on Tice Valley, from the Safeway right there, and then running the kind of a circular shuttle and then back to that Safeway as well. So that's coming down, I think, pretty soon. I don't remember when it was, but it was imminent.
Autonomous bus service through Bishop Branch started today as part of their experiments.
Monday.
That's today.
Monday.
Oh, really? Well, I stand corrected. Next Monday. Any other meetings attended at city expense? Seeing none. Any other announcements from council members, just in general? I'll call on Councilmember Nowak.
Just following up on the autonomous vehicles. I'm actually going to go on a test run tomorrow at Bishop Branch.
Great.
And then it starts on kickoffs on Monday. That's the only reason I know that is because we're doing a preliminary run tomorrow, which will be really interesting to do. And those that may have seen a sample of the autonomous vehicle at Tinkers and Thinkers is likely to be back at Tinkers and Thinkers again this year. So keep an eye out for that when Tinkers and Thinkers arrives to go and check out the autonomous vehicle and what it looks like and what it will be able to do. I also met with Congressman DeSaulnier on transportation challenges in the area. As I represent the city and the county on CCTA and MTC, Congressman DeSaulnier was looking for what he could do to help in Washington, help advance some of our stuff. We talked a lot about bike and ped work, where grants were coming from the federal government. So there were a lot of topics of discussion with him. I also took part in a webinar. For those of you that don't know, Pleasant Hill was the first city in the nation to do online applications for solar power. And that's primarily because we have a wonderful building official who was part of the group that put that together. But for some reason, he doesn't get asked to go on these webinars. I have to go. So I attended a webinar for all electeds for the state of California to talk about solar app. It is required for any city over 50,000 to be in place by September, and any city under 50,000 to be in place by next September. Luckily, our first one was issued in November of 2020, so we're far ahead of that game. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Councilmember Vincent.
I have a few. I attended the Rec and Park egg sighting Easter egg hunt, handled registration for the 0 to 3-year-old participants. It's great to see the diversity in the families that are turning out to these events. And I know Rec and Park has been working on that. I see 2 of the board members in the audience, and I know Zach Shess was on that board. So you're doing a good job. Rogers Ranch Spring Expo and Plant Sale I attended. As I walked in, I was asked if I would take photos of the event. So I spent the day taking photos. I have been back on the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, and we've had a meeting to follow up on our housing element. Sue Nowak was there. And I attended off the grid before I went to the GPAC meeting. Thank you.
Councilmember Shess, any announcements?
I just attended the plant sale at Rogers Ranch as well, which was great to see coming back after the pandemic. So it's a great event. Highly recommend it.
Vice Mayor Rinn, anything else to add?
Yeah, I was attended with Councilmember Vincent at the excellent egg hunt from Pleasant Hill Rec and Park District. I had the honors of being the MC out there that day, and it was a great crowd. Just so excited and so many young families coming out. It was really a good day to see it. Also attended the Pleasant Hill Chamber Mixer, Alex Crudad's businesses last month or this month, I'm sorry. And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you. All I have to add is that I attended the Pleasant Hill Elementary Spring Gala, auctioned off the mayor for the day item as a fundraiser, and the Fearer family was the highest bidder, and their child or children will be attending a city council meeting in the near future. Also want to take this opportunity to recognize Danielle Navarro, who is sitting in the audience. This is Danielle. Danielle is the city clerk and holds many other hats. Danielle is leaving the city at the end of this month to become the assistant city manager for the city of Oakley. Their gain is our tremendous loss. We wish you well, and please stand up so we can formally recognize you and applaud you. Still looking for an agenda item so you can get up here and make one more report. There being no other announcements, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is public comment. The public is welcome at this time to address the city council on items on the consent calendar or other items not listed on the agenda, but within our jurisdiction. You'll have an opportunity to give public comment on the actual agenda items when we call them. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and you can provide them in person by filling out a speaker card and coming to the podium, or through Zoom, meeting ID 828-6954-8975, passcode 485798. The instructions are on the screen. Use the raise the hand feature if you're coming in through Zoom. You can join us by phone by dialing 669-900-6833 and press the *9 to raise your hand. Madam Clerk, do we have any? I have one speaker card already. Do you have any other speaker cards for the?
I have no other speaker
All
cards.
right. And the one card I have is for an agenda item. So is there any public comment on the consent calendar or just general public comment?
There is one hand raised.
Oh, great.
She must have lowered her hand.
All right. All right, well, I'll close public comment and we'll move to the consent calendar. The consent calendar are items considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. No separate council discussion unless called out for discussion by a council member before we vote. I have a correction to the minutes of April 3rd regarding item 9.4. The appointments to the Planning Commission showed Oliver Greenwood, but it was actually Alex Greenwood who withdrew, and Cindy Tenales was recommended for appointment to the Measure K Oversight Committee, not David Field. So with those corrections to the minutes, do we have a motion?
I'll move it with the amended items.
I'll second.
We have a motion by the Vice Mayor and a second by Councilmember Vincent.
Noack,
Yes.
Bryn,
Yes.
Chess,
Yes.
Vincent,
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes. All right. Moving to the action calendar, item 10.1. This is our additional pre-map public hearing to consider composition of districts for district-based elections and also to confirm our schedule for future hearings. I'm going to ask the city attorney if she has any further comments.
No, this is the third hearing. It's an extra hearing pre-map. And as you just stated, we're going to have the maps come out next Monday, the 24th, and we will have hearing on those May 1st. There's also an additional hearing on May 6th at 2 p.m. That's a Saturday. And then the final hearing is scheduled for May 22nd. That's a Monday, but it's not a regular council meeting day. So we're taking public comment and we're taking maps. We're taking anything anybody wishes to give us. We're sending them directly to the demographer. And as I said, the maps will be available on the website on the 24th, next Monday. I don't yet know what time, but those will be out on the 24th.
And just to clarify, when the maps are published on May 24th, how will those be accessible by the public?
They should be on the website. People can pull them up and look at them.
Okay. Is there any sort of notification that will be going out to alert that the maps have been published? Can we put that on our billboard or some other
Yes, we will use all of our social media to do that.
Thank you. Before we go to public comment, I'll just give council an opportunity if anybody has anything they want to say. Okay.
Thank you.
And before I open live public comment, I just want to make note that we did receive written correspondence on this item from Michelle Simone and Javier Gomez. I have a couple of speaker cards, so let's just start with those. Susan Hedgepeth. Welcome, Susan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Susan Hedgepeth. I've been a resident of Pleasant Hill for 22 years. I live at Pleasant Hill Co-housing on Lisa Lane. First, I'd like to say a word of thanks to you and your staff for your responsiveness to the several emails that I've sent since the meeting on April 3rd. At that meeting, you had made some commitments having to do with notice to residents. You followed through with putting all the hearing dates on your website, a big sign outside the library, and sending postcards to all residents. Thank you. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great. It would have been better if you'd been a little faster doing those things, particularly since this meeting tonight is the last one where folks can make public comment about communities of interest before the demographer comes up with the draft maps. I only received my postcard today. And the sign at the library appeared on Saturday. That seems very short notice. I am here tonight because I already knew about the meeting, but there may well be folks who would have liked to be here, but the notice was just too late. And the notice does not list the actual dates of upcoming meetings. I do also appreciate that you took seriously the need to translate the information into several languages. I see that on the website, the library sign, and the postcard. Good job. What I'd like to speak to now is the idea of drawing 4 districts with an at-large mayor. I am not in favor of that plan. I think it would dilute the representation of minority communities in our city because there would likely be only one majority-minority district with one representative on the city council. Also, having an at-large mayor would be a significant change from the way the city is organized right now, and I'm concerned that that would take up a lot of time and be confusing. Perhaps that's something the city might want to consider in the future when there's more time to really look at it, what's involved. But for now, I support the creation of 5 districts with a rotating mayor. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing the draft maps on April 24th.
Thank you, Ms. Hedgepeth. Next speaker is Marian Sostrom.
Good evening, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Rinn, and council members. Thank you very much for listening to community members who asked for more outreach in multiple languages, and I received my card in the mail today. Thank you too for adding a Saturday meeting to review the district maps. I really appreciate the fact that you've been listening to people who live here. I'm here to really encourage the demographer to use the data provided in the maps submitted to the city of Pleasant Hill. And I'm referring to the school ranking map by neighborhood and the safest Pleasant Hill neighborhoods map. These 2 maps give a lot of data that will be really helpful for the demographer to understand that different neighborhoods in Pleasant Hill have different needs and different problems. And so I think it will be useful for all of us to use that information to help everyone in Pleasant Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sostrom. I don't have any other cards, but I'm sure there's other speakers.
We got one coming
We
up.
have one. Dr. Tran, did you want to speak now? You're the
Maybe tomorrow.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Kui Tran, and I'm a resident of Pleasant Hill. Just want to state clearly that I'm here tonight on my own accord. I'm not affiliated with any litigation or any association with any groups that are affiliated with any litigation. I'm registered as no party preference and have no interest in parties or politics. My opinions are my own and do not reflect any organization for which I have an affiliation. But as Councilman Chess can attest to, I have a sincere and unwavering interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I will stand up in support of that goal every single time. I want to take a moment to address some ill-informed and frankly hurtful comments made here recently. One, I was disheartened to hear that the city was unaware that certain minority groups existed in Pleasant Hill. And two, that the city would consider the lack of minority presence in council chambers as a sign that minorities just do not care. We are not invisible. I am not invisible. I am an immigrant. I'm Asian American, and I too live in Pleasant Hill. I belong to a community that's been discriminated against, attacked, and racially profiled, sometimes by the hands of our own government. And yes, it does happen here in Pleasant Hill too. But I also belong to a community that wants our children to succeed, to enjoy economic prosperity, to have equitable health care, to have fair housing, and to live in a safe and welcoming city. Just because minority groups do not have trust in governmental institutions doesn't mean that the city should confuse being disenfranchised with being disinterested. We are interested in what happens in a city, and if we aren't packing the chambers, it's because the city has not done enough to create the safety and the trust needed for us to do so. Minority groups deserve respect, and minority groups deserve to be acknowledged. We shouldn't have to email the city a dozen times just to get something translated. And we shouldn't be blamed for a lack of engagement if the city itself has at most lackluster enthusiasm for this process. If the message coming from the city is that we are doing this because someone is making us doing this rather than it's the right thing to do, that the city embraces its diversity, and that the city looks forward to change, how can you expect people to care if the city does not reciprocate? Now, having said all that, now that we are in a third pre-map meeting, I do see that there are a few in the city that are trying their best to engage minority populations. It would have been nice to have had the city reach out and partner with some of us active in the various communities of interest. The website, the translations, the cards, the physical signs have all been a good start, but it's only been a start. With only 3 post-map meetings left, people are just starting to pay attention, but it's going to take a lot more to get more people engaged. As you know, the map presented last week was just simply to spark interest, with the exception of the Northeast District as well as the East District, both of which should be preserved because of strong majority minority coalitions. The lines in other districts could almost be anywhere. It's not the lines so much as getting people engaged that is the most important thing. And I'm glad that the map provoked questions and inquiry. I'm asking the city to take a more proactive approach. Really reach out to minority groups. We deserve the same attention just like everyone else. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. Are there any other speakers here in the audience? We'll turn to Zoom. Do we have any speakers on Zoom?
We have 3 hands raised.
Great.
Mr. Lewis, please proceed.
Yes, am I off of mute?
Yes, Mr. Lewis, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, sorry about that. I would like to echo the
Oh,
earlier.
we can't hear you.
How about now?
We heard you before you turned your camera on.
How about now? Hello?
Yeah, so I could see you typing hello, but we can't hear you. Or is that the
Okay.
transcription from his end?
No, no, I'm just speaking.
Hmm.
Technology is a strange thing.
Maybe hang up and call in again?
Okay.
I agree. Can we move to the next speaker while Mr. Lewis tries again, and we'll wait for him?
Ms. Simone, please proceed.
Hello, my name is Michelle Simone, and I'm a Pleasant Hill resident. And I'm speaking today to express concerns regarding a proposed 4-district map with the at-large mayor for our city. Since the goal for creating districts, hopefully, is to ensure fair representation for all residents, I believe that an at-large mayor would fall short of this goal. In particular, I'm concerned that a 4-district map would dilute the minority vote in our city. As mentioned before in public comments, both Northeast and Southeast Pleasant Hill look like we have a minority majority coalition. So in addition to the coalition, both of these areas have strong communities of interest. If these two neighborhoods were kind of forced to fit into a 4-district mold, it looks like it would diminish their voting power at city council because the percent of minority voters would decrease in those areas. For best community representation, I hope the city council adopts a 5-district map, as a 5-district map would give residents the opportunity to elect 2 council members from diverse communities with unique needs and interests. And each of those council members would have the chance to represent their district and the city as a whole as mayor. A rotating mayor would provide each council member and therefore each district the opportunity to speak up and work together to set the agenda for discussion items during city council meetings. Whereas an at-large mayor would allow city council to have two representatives from one district, which would tilt the balance of voting power in favor of that one specific district. A fair map for fair representation would have a rotating mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simone. Is Mr. Lewis returned?
Yes, we're going to bring him into the room.
Okay, is this working now?
Perfectly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I would like to echo the comments that have been made about sticking with a 5-member council with a rotating mayor as opposed to 4 districts and an at-large mayor. The city of Pleasant Hill does break relatively cleanly into 5 chunks. The city is basically a big square of roads. So you have the central area and then areas on either sides. Additionally, it's generally just based on my limited experience, the rotating mayor system works significantly better. It's a more equal relationship among council members and so on. I would also like to echo the remarks that have been made about ensuring that the minority coalition areas that are up by DVC and that are on the Concord side of Contra Costa Boulevard, ensuring that those 2 areas each have their own districts, that they are each treated as communities of interest. It is very important to avoid cracking those minority areas and dividing them into different districts. When I tried doing some unfair maps to see what those would look like, that was the main way that it ended up taking shape. So it's very important that those areas have their own districts. And finally, I know this is going to seem like a very minor point, but I have seen some maps floating around that have the districts not in an intuitive order. That's what Contra Costa is set up like for the Board of Supervisors, where you have District 1 is in the west, and then District 2 is in the south, and then District 3 is in the east, and 4 is in the middle, and 5 is in the north. And it's extremely unintuitive and a pain in the neck to work with. So I would encourage the demographer to just try to have the district numbers in order. I know that it seems minor, but future generations will thank you. And this concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We have a third caller on Zoom.
Yes, we have one more hand raised.
Good evening, City Council. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Good evening, residents of Pleasant Hill. Can everyone hear me fine?
We can hear you fine. Be sure to say your name.
My name is Andre Obolensky. Did not come up. I'm using my wife's Zoom, so I apologize. I fielded a lot of phone calls today when this mailer came out. And one of the main questions that was asked, and I'm sure we have an answer to it, but I just want to make sure it goes on public record, the question I'm about to ask, is many residents said, hey, why are we only looking at districting and not taking consideration either term limits and or ranked choice voting, which would be other ways to to follow the California Fair Voting Rights Act. So if, at some point during this meeting or the next meeting, if that could be vocalized so that those residents who are now aware of the process would understand why we're going through this districting process and not the other two, would be helpful. The other thing is I want to echo the comments of the 5-district process. I did look at 4 districting along with the mayor as well. And although a lot of people say, hey, I'd like to have 2 people that represent me and be able to vote twice, there's just no way that you can make the map work. So I'll be short and sweet, and that's what I came on here to say today. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Obolinski. Any other callers on Zoom?
There are no more hands raised.
All right, turning back to the live audience. Anyone feeling inspired to give public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion, if any.
I have a question.
Sure.
At our meeting coming up, the Saturday meeting, are we going to facilitate public comment at that time?
It's a
Okay.
public
there's always
meeting,
public
public
Okay,
comment
I just want that to be, because
in person or
Okay.
by Zoom.
I just want to
Yeah,
make
there's always
make that clear, that there will be public comment.
Well, I've received a number of emails, as the rest of the council have, with people weighing in on their views on neighborhoods and influences. And I live in the Poets Corner neighborhood, and I've given a lot of thought to, what I think, my area is beyond just my immediate neighborhood. And I think my attention is more directed eastward than westward from Poets Corner. So from my perspective, my area is bordered on the west by Pleasant Hill Road, probably on the south by Oak Park, on the north by Gregory, and I think it goes all the way, I think it goes to the other side of the freeway, just when I orient where I am, but it probably ends at the freeway. And so I think it includes the Pleasant Valley neighborhood, as opposed to, I think, some of the other people who don't live in that neighborhood have expressed that neighborhood should be combined with neighborhoods on the eastern side of Contra Costa or the freeway. And those are just my thoughts, sharing my public comment, right? Vice Mayor Rinn.
Yeah, there's been a couple comments about maps that are floating around, and I just wanted to kind of clarify, there's no maps that have been presented at this point from the city. These are just individuals creating their own maps on their own through whatever means they are, and then they're sharing amongst other people and either posting them or passing them around. And so I just wanted to kind of clear up any confusion. These are not the demographer, the professional demographer, and the maps that we have come out with. That hasn't started until our next meeting, or the maps will be released on Monday, the 24th. So there are no official maps out there yet. It's just people making, their own maps at this point and passing them around. So I just want to clear up some confusion out there, because people are alluding to different maps that have been out there, and we have not presented any maps yet. So I just want to clear that up.
I think that's a good clarification. Thank you. Any other comments?
I just wanted to address the 4-district map. I wanted to see that just to see if it's even possible to do. If you can't do it, that more or less ends that conversation. So I wanted it for informational purposes, and I think it's good to have. Other than that, I want to wait and see what the maps are like on the 24th and get serious about the discussion at that point.
Thank you. And
Yeah, just real quick, I would echo Councilmember Vincent's view on that as well. I think I think it makes sense for us to take in as much information here, not only for those on the dais, but for the residents as well. So to me, I don't think it hurts to look at that information and see what those districts look like. I don't think that hurts to have that. That doesn't mean that the decision is going to be made in that direction just because it's presented that we're looking at that. So I think that makes, I'm looking forward to the conversation as well as we move forward.
Yeah. I just want to follow up with the city attorney comment from one of the public comments this evening about alternatives to district elections as a way of complying with the California Voting Rights Act. If the city went to ranked choice voting, would that be compliant with the CVRA and not require district elections?
I'm going to let Jim Priest answer that question.
Thank you. And the other comment also was term limits, as those were two alternatives to districting, and I'd like to hear from you on that.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, honorable staff, members of the public, Jim Priest, Best and Krieger. Let me answer the second option first, which was the term limits. Term limits is an entirely separate concept under the law. It is not a remedy under the CVRA for alleged violations due to at-large elections. So there are two separate issues. Term limits have to be approved by local voters. There's a whole separate process for that. So they're really apples and oranges. If the city council or the citizens by initiative thought term limits were a good idea in Pleasant Hill, that could be put on the ballot, but it would be an entirely separate issue. As for ranked choice voting, there have been some rare circumstances where California charter cities have done ranked choice voting to settle a CVRA lawsuit. However, that is unique to charter cities. There is no state law that authorizes a general law city to go to ranked choice voting at this point. So that is not an option. It's a charter city thing only at this point. I know there's been discussion about changing the elections code to allow ranked choice voting for general law cities, but that's just a concept right now.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Yeah. So, good. Mike, seeing no other comments from City Council, we'll close this item and move on to our next action item. It's item 10.2 to adopt a resolution denying an appeal and upholding the decision of the Planning Commission to deny a variance request for a 6-foot tall fence within a required front yard in an R10 residential zoning district at the property located at 2029 Westover Drive. Just to give an understanding, we'll have the public hearing, staff will provide a report, and then we'll hear a presentation from the appellant. We'll have public comment here at some point, and then we'll have some discussion at the council. So starting with you, Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Rinn, and the council members.
If you could just give your full name.
My name is Andrew Shiflett. I'm an assistant planner here in the planning division.
Thank you.
Tonight, as you mentioned, this is an appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of a variance request. The request was for a 6-foot tall fence within the front yard setback area, where 3 feet is the maximum allowable height. The subject fence has a setback of 9 feet 9 inches, where 20 feet is the minimum allowable setback. A little background, in April of 2022, staff observed the fence under construction at that time in the front yard area. Staff spoke with the property owner and later with both property owners and advised them that the fence was not in compliance with our municipal code. After further discussions with staff, construction on the fence was completed and a variance application was submitted for Planning Commission review. Some more background: on December 8th, 2022, the Planning Commission held a special public hearing where the request was subsequently reviewed and then continued. The commission directed the applicant to work with staff at that time and determine if any modifications could be made that would resolve the nonconformities. And the commission discussed the possibility of a minor exception, which could allow up to a 12-inch increase in allowable fence height within the front yard area for a total of 4 feet. On December 22nd, 2022, planning staff did meet with the applicants and discussed the direction provided by the commission. After this meeting, the applicant provided a cost estimate to staff that included pricing for complete removal of the fence, the non-conforming fence, and revisions to the fence that would allow it to possibly conform to the minor exception allowance. On January 10th, 2023, the commission continued the public hearing and then denied the variance request, as they could not make the appropriate findings to support the request at the time. On January 23rd, the applicant submitted a timely appeal to staff. I provided some contextual aerial maps and street view images to give everyone an idea of the surrounding area. I've marked the house, 2029 Westover, with a red star. You can see it on the northeast corner of Westover and Pleasant Hill Road. Here's an aerial comparison. This is something they brought up in their analysis, so we just wanted to take a look at the before and after, so to speak. The Pleasant Hill Road Improvement Project that the Engineering Division completed a few years ago. The road improvement project focused on bicycle lanes, crosswalks, median landscaping, and general enhancements, but didn't increase lanes or traffic or streetlights. Here's some on the ground before and after to show you the conditions of the intersection and the home before and after the fence construction. You can clearly see the wood fence there in the front yard. Here's a look back from Pleasant Hill Road, looking at the corner with the 2029 Westover. And then one more shot looking northbound at the intersection where their house is located. And you can see with the retaining wall and shrubs and some sloping land, their house is just out of view. Here's a more detailed look at the fence for your review. And I can at this time point out a few things related to design. Our design guidelines, something we looked at in our staff report. Generally, our design guidelines encourage fences in front yards that are transparent. And also that do not isolate the front of the home from the street. So we maintain an open feel in the front yards in our communities. Our design guidelines also encourage fences that have changes in height, changes in plane, and avoid a linear look such as this. Here's a site plan provided by the applicant. They have a rather large site, about 15% larger than what's typical in the neighborhood, with a large backyard, and I believe it's Grayson Creek running along the back. And we'll zoom in on the front yard area so you can take a look at the fence location, how it aligns with the front of the home, and comes pretty close actually to the corner of Westover Drive and Pleasant Hill Road, where engineering staff did find that it encroaches slightly into our safety triangle at the intersection of Pleasant Hill Road and Westover Drive. And so that's something that we would be concerned about if this fence were maintained as is.
Can I just interrupt for a sec?
Certainly.
Go back to that last picture. So along Pleasant Hill Road, there's a fence. Is that right at the sidewalk or is that within the required setback?
On Pleasant Hill Road, the fence, it's an older fence. It's not part of this new fence construction.
But it's part of their property, right?
It's part of their property. It's approximately 5 feet behind the back of sidewalk.
Right, so there's a gap between the sidewalk and the fence?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Some variance findings to consider. There's 3 of them. The first one is the variance is typically based on existence of special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, such that the strict application of those zoning regulations deprives the property owner of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity. And staff found those special circumstances applicable to this property. Variance finding 2, the variance does not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with limitations on other properties in the vicinity. And staff found that allowing a variance for a 6-foot tall fence could be seen as the granting of a special privilege. And the last variance finding is the variance substantially meets the intent and purpose of the zoning district in which the property is located. And staff found the variance request does not meet the intent and purpose for the reasons I stated. To conclude, staff's recommendation is that the council review the project, receive public testimony, and approve the resolution to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision to deny the variance. Thank you.
Can you expand on the discussions with the property owner while the fence was under construction, which led to the fence being completed instead of stopping the project?
I'll do my best. I went out there with our code enforcement investigator just to address the situation, take some measurements. At the time, their fence contractor was on site and they were advised that the construction would need to stop and that it looked like the fence was going to be non-compliant as it was in the front yard setback area. That was the discussion and our direction to the property owners and the contractor at the time to stop construction. That was our intention. And when we followed up on subsequent site visits, we did find that the fence construction had been completed at that point, yeah.
Did staff recommend the property owner seek a variance? Go ahead and finish the project and then seek a variance afterwards?
Staff recommended, this comes up often in conversations with applicants or with property owners when people have a non-conforming situation or even when they want to plan an addition. They'll often find out that it doesn't conform to our code, and their next question is, well, what kind of special accommodations can I apply for? And at that point, we tell people, well, there are certain allowances. If you can make findings, if you can make a case that the findings can be made in your certain circumstance or situation. In the end, we can't tell people to apply or to not apply for applications. It's up to them to determine if their certain situation meets those findings.
Vice Mayor, you have a question?
I was just trying to get a little more clarity at that time of that site visit. How far had the project progressed? Like, was it just posting grounds and you saw the height of the posts, or like how far the panels up, those kind of things?
I think they'll show a picture of that state in their presentation.
Okay.
I'd estimate it at 90%.
Okay.
95%.
Any other
I just had
questions? Yeah, go
a
ahead.
question. You said the fence lines up with the front of the house. So the front of the house is in the setback as well?
The front of the house is non-conforming, legal non-conforming. Yes, it's in the setback area.
Okay. I'll talk about that later. That just seems strange that the house is in the setback area and fence isn't allowed to be in the setback area, but the house is. So that's, anyway, okay.
I can quickly answer by saying the house predates the city of Pleasant Hills jurisdiction, so it was built at a different time.
The front yards in that neighborhood are, I'll call it shallow, right? Compared to other neighborhoods in Pleasant.
There are a number of neighborhoods that do have shallower front yards than 20 feet, and this is one of them.
Any other questions of Mr. Shiflett before we turn to the applicant?
Not this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Is there anywhere that they
I can't think of any guidelines that take those characteristics into factor now.
That actually raises one of them. Can you just expand on what a guideline is vis-a-vis we have absolute prohibitions on fences over a certain height in certain locations, but we're looking at this also through the prism of design guidelines. What are the role of design guidelines and what's the impact of the design guidelines?
Sure. The citywide residential design guidelines is a document that was approved by our Architectural Review Commission at public hearings. And it's guidelines that help steer good design in the city based on supported attributes. So it's not a codified language, but it guides design. Does that answer your question?
Right. I mean, I can probably give my own definition of guideline, meaning it's not like mandatory, right?
Right.
It's an encouragement, I guess.
That was a circular definition I gave.
Right.
Yeah, it's an encouragement.
So I did hear you describe the fence, I think, as a linear design, and did I understand that was not in conformance with our guidelines, that type of design?
That's correct.
So, I mean, I've seen that design often as a modern, design in our city and other cities all around us. Does that indicate our design guidelines perhaps aren't up to date, or what? When was the last time, I guess, the fence guidelines were reviewed?
Our design
by AFC?
guidelines were last updated, I want to say, in 2018, 2019 timeframe. So that was the last opportunity that the city and the commission, Architectural Review Commission, had to look at our fence guidelines.
Okay. So if the fence was designed as it is in a linear or horizontal fashion, but at the appropriate height, we wouldn't be critical of it. Is that fair?
Their guidelines, so I think we would keep an open mind and look at it in the context that it is.
Was a permit required to construct the fence?
In a front street facing yard, yes, a permit is required.
Right, and the applicant did all the proper procedures, applied for a permit?
After we became aware of the fence construction and we went on site as soon as we found out. And so they had not applied for permits prior to fencing work.
I see. So if they had followed the procedure in the proper order in applying for the permit, would they have received information about design guidelines and restrictions on front yard fences?
Sure, that's very customary of what we do in the planning division for members of our public.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else follow up? No. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's hear from Mr. and Mrs. Finkus, Christine or Kevin. Good evening.
I'm not sure. Is there a PowerPoint?
The podium is movable up and down if it's too high or too
So is
low.
the mic.
And the mic.
I'm not the tallest.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Wren, and council members Noack, Chess, and Benson. My name is Kevin Finkus, and we're here to discuss a fence variance for our property at 2029 Westover Drive. With me, I have my wife, Christine, and our three girls, Sophia, Amelia, and Claire. A little background also in regards to this house. So this was our first house that we purchased in 2017, right before we had the twin girls, Amelia and Claire. We knew we were moving into a corner lot property. As time evolved and traffic continued to increase along the busy street of Pleasant Hill Road, we started to kind of formulate some sort of strategy to kind of alleviate the concerns that we had when leaving the house and having our kids kind of leaving the house on their own as well. Over the years, many things had come up on Pleasant Hill Road that really kind of were eye-opening for us. Many accidents right at the intersection where we live on. I'd like to kind of provide I might pop back to these in a second. Sorry, guys. This is one accident that that occurred right at the corner of the house. There was also a tragedy that struck just 100 yards from the house where somebody died. Actually, drunk driver screamed into a tree that was just, like I said, 100 yards from the house. So these were real reasons that kind of provided or that kind of raised the alarms basically for us as a family, that we needed to kind of provide some sort of shelter and something that provided our family a safe place to appreciate the house and kind of live a normal life in Pleasant Hill. I'm going to skip back really quickly here. So Pleasant Hill Road being an arterial road for other towns actually passing through. This was another reason that we constructed this fence alongside with drought tolerant plants to not only provide our family with the safety of a fence and a barrier for the kids, but also from the extreme differences in lights that we've come to kind of unfortunately have to live with at the house. Technology has increased. The Pleasant Hill Road project actually installed a whole bunch of additional modern lighting that are LED lights that are extremely bright. Cars now brighter lights left and right. As the Pleasant Hill project came to fruition, the entire corridor was very bright, modern looking, but it actually provided quite the runway for cars day and night to actually be able to see a little further on when there wasn't too much traffic and a lot of racing and speeding on this highway. Also, I wanted to make a point that this house, we live on the corner of Pleasant Hill Road and Westover Drive at a stoplight, a four-way stoplight, which is actually very unique to the entire community, that whole area. We're one of the few houses that actually look out into a four-way road under a streetlight. Not only that, our house is, if you can see here, is the only one that's at elevation with Pleasant Hill Road on a corner. So as I had mentioned before, we built this fence, primarily to provide safety for the family. Unfortunately, we had no idea what we were doing when we were doing this. This is our first house and our first project that we had ever, encountered in terms of permitting, and we
Can I
found out.
interrupt you for a second? There's a light fixture that just fell from the ceiling up there.
Oh, wow.
I just don't want to get anywhere to get hit.
If we can get some
If we can
people to
move the back row, you guys just want to move out of the area? Just to,
Sorry. I just noticed that swing.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Fincus. You could proceed.
Okay. As I had mentioned, this was our first project that we had saved up for many years to not only provide safety for the family, but also enhance the exterior of the house for us and for the neighborhood. And after the fence was 90+% completed, we realized that we did not go through a permitting process that is typical for a fence, and our setback was not in compliance. We had measured what we thought was 20 feet from the curb, and also along with being flush with our home, with the front of our house. And again, this goes back to our naivety of not knowing that there was permitting process that might have helped us, further gather information in regards to proper fence heights and setbacks and so on and so forth. This is just a photo of the fence, as you guys had mentioned with Andrew. Everything was built outside of just this the remaining gate slats that were on there. It was completed otherwise.
Looks like you poured concrete after that patio.
Well, actually that's just gravel. We put gravel where all the dirt you see is just all gravel. And then where that tarp is, that is concrete. Yeah, they were just protecting the concrete. As you can see at night, it's pretty bright. The lights from, cars, obviously, without this is very difficult for us to block out of the house. We have installed the blackout shades. We did that way before. We did this years before, and they don't allow those fine lines of light to come through, but it's still a glaring light that illuminates every single window in all the bedrooms on the side. This actually prevents almost 100% of the car lights from not shining into the rooms of our home.
Can I just follow up on that? So the car lights, are these as cars are turning from Pleasant Hill Road on
So
the
the
west
biggest
over?
one is the turning into play. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so to back up a little bit, so this is a street that is a pretty busy street going into Westover Drive, as Strandwood Elementary is just down the street. So this is where all the kids are getting dropped off and picked up and so on and so forth. Yep. And we had already gone over this. So if for us to be in compliance with at the current height, we'd have to put the fence back another 10 feet roughly, which would give us 5 feet to the, essentially 5 feet from our actual house, the front of our house, which for us, it's like, we'd be walking with our hands touching the house and the fence at that point. This is another view of kind of the fence aligning with the front of the house that we thought was conforming. And some letters that I believe you guys have all received from some of the neighbors and the community support. So, and I also wanted to thank all the neighbors and the entire community for sending in all these letters and voicing their support in favor of us keeping this fence as is. This is the before. right when we bought the house, essentially. This tree right here was an example of, back in the 70s, this tree actually prevented a car from barreling into the front of the house. This tree has since died. We obviously had to remove it. It's an old ash tree. This is a significant investment for our family. As I said, we were lucky to get to finally buy a house when we did. We saved up for several years and thought we had, we were doing something that would not only provide, aesthetically for the neighborhood and an update that we thought was needed, but also provided safety for the family and for us to kind of live, in peace there. So we're asking the city to allow us to keep our fence as is, and in the area where it is as well.
Could I ask you to address the minor exception that looks like you had some discussions with staff, perhaps, of just lowering the height?
Sure. We had, there was a lot of good back and forth with the planning commission, actually, hence why we had a second follow-up meeting. So we were asked to kind of draft a few actual design alternatives that might be approved based on off of the appearance. So my wife Christine had some things drawn up professionally that had much more transparent slats, that still the height was there, and it still blocked off a lot of the light that one of the main reasons was we were trying to accomplish that. But it did open up at least the air because we were trying to, appease the recommendation by the city.
There was if I read the staff report correctly, the minor exception would have allowed the fence in its current design and components, but just require the lowering of the fence to perhaps 4 feet. And I wonder if you could just address your considerations for rejecting that.
Well, so we, the reason number one was safety for the family, for the kids. So not only would a 6-foot tall fence prevent these kids from kind of getting out and jumping over the smaller alternative, which would be the minor exception or less, but it also would prevent us from having, from the car lights and extra noise as well. Let's see if yes, I have a few extra things on here. I know we wanted to kind of just quickly, I know we're kind of unfortunately kind of the poster child right now for this fence in our neighborhood for reasons we understand, but there are so many options or so many fences right along this busy street, that not only do they not have cars turning into the street, but their fences are right on the sidewalk, all non-conforming. And we're not going to provide addresses because we don't want to call anybody out per se, but we did want to share a lot of that with you guys as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Finkus. Any questions of Mr. Finkus while he's up?
Yeah. You guys are talking the contractor.
No, unfortunately, no. And we, as much as, again, we don't want to throw somebody under the bus that's trying to make a living too. So it's water to the bridge at this point, but no. And we regret it in a big way. Trust me, we've learned a crazy lesson that we will never do again whenever we make any improvements.
Mr. Councilman Vincent.
Sure. Did you consider some options such as lowering the fence and then maybe using landscaping to block the lights, or some shades that could drop down on your porch?
Shades, no. Landscaping, yes. And we're actually building, we've actually installed a tree that's pretty, a bushy tree. So regardless of the outcome, we have something kind of existing there. But at the same time, it was not going to accomplish the goal that we wanted, was to keep the kids safe. If Christine and I were out front in front of the fence, we wanted to have that peace of mind that if we were able to turn our back for a second, that the kids couldn't make their way out.
Thanks.
Councilmember Nowak. Did you have questions?
No.
I thought you did. Any more? Vice Mayor Wren? All right. Thank you. Did you present everything you wanted?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're just gonna talk about you now.
Thanks so much.
Public comment?
Sure. We did receive a significant amount of public comment on this item before the hearing. But I'll open up public comment now. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. If you're here in the room, please fill out a card and come to the dais. And I do have one card. And also we'll take public comment by Zoom using meeting ID 828-6954-8975, passcode 485798. And you could also call us on the telephone at 669-900-6833. So let's start with Trevor Grunet. Did I say your last name correctly? Gannett. I put an R in there where there wasn't one. I'm sorry.
Appreciate you giving me the time here. I only have a few moments. Got to get my kids home to bed. I also live on Westover Drive, about 10 houses down. It's a very busy street. It's one of the major arteries into Gregory Gardens off Pleasant Hill Road. I completely understand why, he built the fence that high to keep the lights out. Cars turning on Westover Drive all evening, going to be right in your windows. It's very tough on somebody. As well as just the traffic flow on that street. I have 2 small children. I keep them in the backyard. We don't play in our front yard. Just because people fly down that street. It's a hill. They get going about 35, 40 miles an hour most of the time. I'm going to keep the kids in the backyard safe. I just wanted to say that I think he should get the variance and be allowed to keep the fence. I think it looks very nice. And being in line with the house makes it look even nicer. If he was to put it back, that would be just not very cohesive with the way it looks. Yeah. So thank you for your time, and I hope you vote his way.
Thank you, Mr. Gannett. Next speaker, Sheila Weston.
Good evening. I live a block away from the house on Westover Lane. I drive or walk past this house every day. I think the fence looks great, and I totally appreciate all the comments about the lights and the safety. And I would just like to say I fully support allowing the Finkuses to keep the fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Camberoff. Did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you.
It's a tough one. I would like to support the fence also. I agree with everything that's been said in its defense here. And I ask that the council approve their request for a variance. It seems a reasonable accommodation for specific circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a card, but the person did not write their name. But the email is Al Sadeh. Please come forward. Did I say your name correctly? Al Sadeh.
I'm the Finkus next door neighbor, and I think the fence looks great. It flows really well with the neighborhood, and the fact that they are right next to an intersection. I feel for them because I am also right next to that intersection, and we can hear a lot of noise. The lights are glaring from there, and especially when people turn in, you can see the lights right in your living room. So in this particular situation, I think it's more than warranted, and the design is beautiful. It just enhances the neighborhood and fits right in.
Thank you, Mr. Sadeh. We have a card from Jason Willett. Wait. Oh, he needed to leave at 7:15. He granted Trevor Gannett his speaking time. Trevor, Mr. Gannett, did you want to come up again and speak?
You can take the kids home.
All right. Well, he wrote some comments in support of approving the variance on his speaker card. We'll make note of that. Are there any other people here in the chambers that wish to speak? While you're mulling that over, we'll turn to see if anybody is on Zoom.
We have 2 hands raised.
All right, let's bring them on in.
Hi there. I'm a neighbor to this property on Pleasant Hill Road. And one thing that I want to bring up right away, we've only lived here 3.5 years. And immediately upon moving in was the renovations to Pleasant Hill Road. And I just want to acknowledge that the city itself built a fence directly across the street from this property that is about 9 or 10 feet high on the exact same corner, just opposite him. Right up against the sidewalk. There's the concrete wall along Pleasant Hill Road. And then at the end of that concrete wall, they repaired and replaced the homeowner's fence. Again, it's about 9 or 10 feet high. There are many properties. I know the address says Westover, but you really have to consider that the property is partially on Pleasant Hill Road. Yes, their front door faces Westover. In the 3 years I've been here, I've had to call Pleasant Hill Police 3 to 4 times. Drunk drivers. Just 2.5 weeks ago, we had an intoxicated man at 12:45 a.m. knock and ring our doorbell. We have 4 children. And it is a major safety issue from people who wander up to our front doors. There's been a drunk driving death, as he said, just 100 meters from their front door. We had a drunk driver hit the median out front both of our houses. We both went sprinting out in the middle of the night in pajamas to an extremely intoxicated man who had hit 3 in front of 3 of our homes before the car finally reached its final resting place. I also want to talk about the city design guidelines. I used to be in a design review commission myself. And the guidelines have like 7 or 8 points that I went to, and they are good design, sustainability, environmentally friendly. One of the reasons that house is set so forward on the lot is because of the creek and the environmental factors to the creek. That's probably why the house was set so far in the front. I think, council member, you brought it up yourself, that the fence does not even it doesn't go beyond the front of their house. The gutters go closer to the street. Every house along Westover has that front fence, and almost every single one is within 2 to 3 inches of the front of their house. It just doesn't go the entire front of their house, right? But it does connect to their side fences. Other things that I want to say is just location. You have to consider the house is actually a Pleasant Hill Road home and a Westover home, even though that's not the official address. Safety, the number of drunk drivers. I know the lights are, to some, seem beautiful and make the road feel more safe for the driver. It's actually become less safe for us as homeowners because people have increased their speeds because their visibility has increased. Anyway, thank you. I think you should approve the fence. It's beautiful. And by the way, where you're sitting is a horizontal design, the same as the fence right in front of you, council members. Where you're sitting is a beautiful horizontal design. Identical.
Could we get your name for the, could we get your name
Sure,
for the
it's
record?
Jennifer. It's Jennifer Ricketts.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yep.
Any other callers on Zoom?
We have one more caller.
Yes, hello, this is Marshall Lewis. I wasn't expecting to get to share this bit of knowledge I have today, but here I am. I happen to know something about the capacity of 6-foot tall fences with inadequate setbacks when it comes to stopping moving vehicles, because a couple of years ago when I was living in Concord, a car was blasting down Clayton Road at 70 or 80 miles an hour. It turned right onto my street because I lived right on the corner. It bounced off of a BMW that was on the other side of the road and went straight towards my home. And the only reason it didn't collide with my home, go through the wall and destroy my armchair and possibly me, is that there was a solidly built 6-foot tall fence with probably about a 3-foot setback. And that fence was able to stop that vehicle that was moving at tremendous speed. So the safety considerations that this family has are very real. And the solution that they found, I know through personal experience, is a very effective one. So I would encourage council to grant this variance, especially because they did not initially realize that it was going to be non-compliant. And they did then go through and try to do the proper steps. And I would also probably recommend against reducing the height of the fence, because the more mass the fence has, the better it is at stopping onrushing vehicles. So I would encourage council to grant this variance.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any other callers on Zoom?
There are no more hands raised.
All right, coming back to the chambers. Anyone here in chambers wish to provide further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion. Who would like to lead us off here?
I'm happy to start.
Sure, Councilmember Nowak.
I got a couple of comments. One, I just want to comment on design guidelines. I think I have spoken at a couple of council meetings when we've talked about design guidelines and PUDs and other things that we need to redo the design guidelines for Pleasant Hill. We've had a lot of housing developments done that we have had to make variances for because our design guidelines are old and outdated versus what we're looking at. I think we're going to have to redo them pretty significantly with the density that's also being required. And with increased density, we're going to have to look for ways for privacy for families. And so this is going to be an important piece of redoing design guidelines. So I think that's really important. Now, from the perspective of living on a very busy road with lights, I totally understand. I grew up on Route 1 in Connecticut, and I used to watch movies on the walls from the lights on the cars coming by through the trees on my wall. And I was probably a good 150 feet from the road. So I'm very sympathetic to that in that intersection. And I think while we redid the road and we didn't change the size of it, we made it smoother and we have made it, I think, more amenable for people to drive on. So I think we are getting some more driving. I certainly, when I get to the intersection of Grayson and Pleasant Hill and Gregory, there's a lot more traffic there than used to be there. So I think having made that road nicer, we have increased the traffic there. So those are some of my points. I don't like the fact that things are being built without permits. We have had several situations here where people have built things without permits, and that is an issue. We've got to try to do that. In this case, I think location based on that corner, I think the design is lovely. I have driven by a couple of times just to check it out. I think it's very nice design. I think I've seen it in many places, this new concept of this solid fencing on a horizontal basis, and I think it looks good. I think having lined it up with the front of the house is, in my opinion, fairly understandable why you thought you could do that. If the house can sit there, why couldn't a fence? So I am sort of on the mindset that I would be okay with allowing the variance.
Vice Mayor Rooney.
Yeah, in full disclosure, I did tour the property personally. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Pingus, and did get to see it firsthand and kind of walk, just kind of see what it looked like in person. And I think the pictures do justice to what you did over there. My concerns too is with our intention to improve the road, what we think is an improvement in safety for, especially the bike lanes and things that we did for that. The lights, I don't know if the heights of the lights were different from the existing heights than we installed the new lighting system. Having the new brighter LED does improve the safety in general of that, but it also could create hardship on neighbors in the area. So I see that. One thing too is coming around that corner, the road kind of dips starting at the Finkus property, going down by the creek and then making that left turn at Mangini kind of as it goes there. So there is a bit of a slope as you come, you're traveling north Pleasant Hill Road, and then you make that right turn onto Westover. There is a bit of a grade starting to happen at there. So that would definitely subject them to increased car lights and things given the slope of that. I think that's one of the criteria that we look at for the topography is for one of the reasons for granting a variance in that situation, given the unique circumstances of that particular intersection. There's a couple other factors in that too that kind of attribute to that. So I would agree with Councilmember Nowak on that. And probably in this very, very unique situation. I think this is kind of a one-off, that this time we would grant a variance, but I think since the house is so far forward, it's going straight across, and some other factors beyond that. But I think in this case, I could go ahead and move with a variance also.
Councilmember Chess?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I when I lived in San Francisco in the 90s, and I was on the second floor of an apartment building, and if I like leaned out with with a broom, I could probably. Can you hear me?
Can you turn on your mic?
It is on.
Is it on? Okay.
Yeah. We good?
Turn them both on.
How do I sound now?
Good.
Okay. Anyway, I could touch the street light, and so I appreciate that aspect of it. But what I'm struggling, and I feel bad because your contractor led you astray. I don't see how any contractor could tell you that fence was. I mean, they should know that, and I feel bad for that. I do, and I know that because I've worked with contractors. And they'll tell you, oh, that's code. And I had no idea that was code. But they know because they work in that industry. So I'm disappointed to hear that from you guys. These design guides are not, they're not to legislate taste. They're legislate what the city is expected to look like and in some conformity in some form or fashion. Now, so what I'm concerned about with this is if we allow this, then who's to say that somebody down the street doesn't paint and create a really obnoxious fence? And now where are we at? Because, and the thing is we have all this wonderful support from the community in part because it's a nice fence, but it's a wall to me. It looks like a wall. It doesn't look like a fence. And to address the family's concerns about safety, I think if you drop that down by 2 feet, and which is what I think the Planning Commission tried to do, I think that would be a kind of a nice compromise. And I would almost argue that the 4-bys that hold up that fence are the ones that are going to need to be that's what's going to protect your family. I think not the horizontal boards, not the 6 feet. I disagree. I disagreed with the caller. I think it's really your 4-bys that are really going to be really going to hold up that fence and keep if some crazy thing was going to happen. So I'm not of the one to I'm afraid this is a slippery slope, and we're being asked to look at this based on this situation. And if we want to do our design guides, then let's go. I mean, we want to do that. We'll do that at the appropriate time. I would like to see this fence reduced by 2 feet. I'd like to see the design kept. It is a nice fence, but that's kind of where I'm lying right now.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I was actually on the planning commission for the first hearing on this. I was not on the commission for the second hearing. The issue we faced the first time around is there's more than one guideline that's been violated. The fence should be 3 feet and it's 6, so it's twice as tall as it should be. It should be set back 20 feet and it's only about half of that, 9 feet, 9 inches. It should be transparent and create the feel of openness, and we don't meet that standard. I understand the safety concerns. I don't know that you need the 6 feet to take care of that. All through the town, there are fences that are 3 feet tall, and people have families, and the kids tend to stay in. And as someone pointed out, most kids these days play in the backyard rather than the front. Something that was mentioned that got my attention, because I had raised this at the Planning Commission. Because that fence is so solid, I have concerns if, say, the police were phoned out because somebody talked about people ringing the doorbell or knocking on the door. When they show up, they really can't see what's happening on the front porch because there's this fence. So I do feel sorry that the contractor didn't advise you up front and you couldn't work with the city, because I think there are some viable solutions. But at this point, I can't make the findings to support the variance.
I think I understand all the viewpoints that I've heard. So I start with the guidelines. Guidelines are just that. They're guidelines. They're not mandatory. They're not restrictive, nor are they expansive. They're just considerations to take into account when evaluating a project. If we were just looking at the setback issue, I would have no problem finding make the appropriate findings for variance for the fence to be in its current location, given the siting of the house on the lot, the location of the lot. What I'm thinking about, though, are the other applicants that have preceded you with similar, but not exactly the same issues. We have had a corner house on Hamilton Court that built a fence in the right of way. The city required it be moved, and the homeowner did move it back, so it was no longer in the right of way. But they had the exact same considerations. The corner home has about being able to use as much of their land as possible, safety, young children, all of that. But the city mandated that the setback requirement there be honored. We've had other applicants over the years, either when I was on planning commission or in prior years on city council, where we have to look at the totality of the circumstances here. I personally like the design a lot, but this isn't about whether it looks nice or not. It's really whether or not it complies with the requirements of the city. And there are ways to get around the requirements of the city if we can make particular findings that allow us to make the changes. And so I'm looking at this particular situation. What is unique about this situation that differentiates it from other corner lots? It is on a corner of a residential and what I call a commercial street. I don't think it's a highway. And for what it's worth, I was outvoted to narrow Pleasant Hill Road that led up to that design. I was advocating what they call a road diet. It restricted the street to one lane in each direction, but I was in the minority there. So you could thank these people. So
I knew that was coming.
I throw people under the bus all the time. So
We're used to it.
so, in that sense, it's unique. On the other hand, and I'm just going to borrow somebody else's description I heard about a similar situation, that it's like the homeowner that bought a house in the airplane flight path near the airport and then complains about the airplane noise. And I don't mean that to sound harsh, but you did move to this corner that had, 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. It was a controlled intersection with streetlights and cars turning. The lights are naturally going to be directed into your front yard, just as anybody turning a corner, their lights are generally directed into the front yard of the home on the opposite side of the street. So I don't find that particularly unique. And so I really wish that there was a compromise that, because I think the planning commission may have been able to, and so I think the council would be able to find the grounds for a minor exception, which is allowing the fence to stay in its current location, but just modify the height. I'm going to call just a 5-minute break because I want to review some of the material that was in the staff report one more time. Okay with everyone?
Yeah.
5 or 10-minute break.
That's fine.
Thank you. We'll return at 9:10. city attorney and our assistant city manager and planner, Mr. Shiflett. So the problem is that the applicants are seeking a variance, which requires specific findings by the city council. The planning commission already reviewed it and could not make those findings. And I'm having a hard time finding the basis to make the findings to grant the variance here. The use and enjoyment of the property is not diminished by requiring the applicant comply with the fence height limitations. There is an alternative that would meet many, but not all, of the applicant's objectives. And that would be by seeking a minor exception, which would allow the fence presumably to stay in its current location, but just at a lower height. I'm just hard pressed to see the legal basis to grant the variance. And this is difficult. I really appreciate the position you're in. I appreciate you're innocent in many respects by just not being informed by your contractor and not being plugged in enough to know that, you know, permits are required on your own. It's your first home, and you've obviously invested a lot to renovate the property, and it is beautiful. But I just don't see the basis to make the findings to support a variance here. Also wanted to comment, both Alan Vincent and I have served on the planning commission, and after moving from planning commission to the city council, occasionally have the opportunity to hear at the city council level the same matter that was heard at the planning commission. And I'll turn to the city attorney to just weigh in on that unique issue.
And that's perfectly fine because this is a de novo hearing. It's not a traditional type of appeal where it's based upon the record from the subordinate body. This is a new hearing. And so there could be new testimony, there could be new information provided. So there is absolutely no reason why someone who's now on council and who heard the very same matter on planning commission cannot hear it at this hearing.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I would turn to Councilmember Nowak and Councilmember Wren to, you know, see if they think I'm missing something on why I don't think the basis is here to make the findings for the granting of a variance.
Well, I would say on the first, the variance is based on the existence of special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings. And I think based on the fact of their location at this very busy intersection and how it's positioned on, as Councilmember or Vice Mayor Wren said, its topography versus the road. I think those are two areas where we could certainly make a finding for location for a variance. Special privileges, I don't know. I don't think this is a special privilege. This is something being granted because of unique circumstances on its location to a very busy road, to the light circumstances and the activity in that area. So I can find it in those two areas for sure. The third one, the variance substantially meets the intent and purpose of the zoning district in which the property is located. Okay, I think that's a little trickier in my mind. However, I think to the extent that the house is in the setback, I have trouble saying why a fence couldn't be in the setback. So under those bases, I can find the findings.
Yeah, so I could agree with you on the location of the fence, not being within the setback, but I mean, this is a standard R10 zoning district in the city of Pleasant Hill, and I'm just very concerned about the impact of this type of fence appearing in every residential neighborhood.
Well, I was at the library this morning, and the fence around the properties across from the library is very similar.
It is. It's a daycare, and they got a variance for the height.
No, the 34 homes. Some are side yards, some are front, but that's the fence that goes around.
Actually, it's the perimeter fence around the project that is I don't think it's 6 feet in height.
Yeah, I think it is.
No, I have no problem with the horizontal nature of the fence either. I mean, I do appreciate our design guidelines seem to indicate otherwise, but this is a modern design, and I think we've all noticed that they've been popping up lately, and then we all look and say, hey, that's great. If I build a new fence, I want a fence that looks like that. So I don't think that's the issue. I think it's more the size of the fence. That I just don't think there's the basis to make a variance finding on the height of the fence. Go ahead.
And I don't know if it needs to be inclusive of all three of those items to approve a variance, or if we just have to approve one of those, as far as those go. All three have to be met in
Yes.
that? Okay. Similar to Councilmember Noack, and the other thing too is usually when we get stuff like this, you don't really see the neighborhood rally around a specific individual like this. With, we do have the petition with 70 something names on it. You have several of the neighbors who have written correspondences. I know we've gotten a ton of emails on it. Several have spoken here tonight, and usually in that group there's a handful of people that are counter to it, that is saying this is an atrocity, this is destroying the neighborhood, this is but this pretty much unanimous. I mean, I could be wrong, there could be somebody against it. But to see that number of people in the neighborhood rallying around this too, I know it doesn't specifically fall into the variance granting guidelines, but I think it's kind of a, it opens up a whole nother discussion on our guidelines, which I agree with Councilmember Noack need to be revamped. But I think this is a very unique, specific situation, and to, agree with Councilmember Chess's concerns that this opens kind of a Pandora's box. And I think that on this one it's more of a unique circumstances given topography and some other challenges on that location. And yes, it is buyer beware when you buy in a busy street and things like that. I get that. But, I think the city did kind of contribute to the detriment of this property when we did improve that intersection. With the lights, I don't have all the information about the height of the lights, the new lights, the type of lighting that we installed. Did it create more light into their home and things like that? And so given some of those special circumstances applicable to this specific property only, that's why I'm leaning towards the variance in this.
Just since you mentioned it, I omitted mentioning the people that did submit a written comment ahead of tonight's meeting, and that was Brian Green, the family of Ken and Nancy Clark, Alcida, Jerry and Cindy Lopez, Terry Schmidt, Myron Bachhaus, Telzy Gorley, Joshua Welch, and the Osterholt family. We all received written comment from them prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you for that, Claire.
All right. Well, what troubles me most about what you just said, Councilmember Wren, is that you couldn't find all the findings. You couldn't make all the findings required for a variance. And that's really where I'm stuck. Maybe I'm 2/3 of the way there, but that's just not far enough. I think the height needs to be reduced. And I think it's a subject that requires further council discussion to see if there's some amendments to our ordinance that needs to be reviewed to make sure that we are keeping abreast of changing designs in the city of Pleasant Hill and surrounding communities. So I'm not able to make the findings, but we want to call for a vote, or do we want to enter further discussion?
I'm ready to vote.
Anyone? Further discussion?
Just clarities, since the existing house structure is already in the setback, does that change the intent and purpose of the zoning district in which the property is located, since the house is already built in the setback?
No, that's, I think, the factor that would indicate to me that the location of the fence is, I could make a variance finding if it was just simply on the location of the fence because of that unique circumstance of the house itself being within the front setback and the fence going no further. Again, and I don't know how unique it is having a house at the intersection of Pleasant Hill Road and a residential street, but the Pleasant Hill Road and the residential street and the uses that those streets are therefore haven't changed over time. The only thing that's changed is the design improvements of Pleasant Hill Road, which I've heard people say has led to faster driving. But I think the accident that was one of the slides, I think was pre-improvement of the road as well. So, I mean, certainly that's something that we could look at further or send to our Traffic Safety Commission to see if there's something further that needs to be done on Pleasant Hill Road in light of some of the anecdotes we've heard tonight. But again, that it was a controlled intersection, that people turn right, that there were overhead lights. All of those conditions were impacting this property before the applicant bought the property, even after they bought it, which led the applicant, the family, to look for alternatives to minimize those impacts. And I think they were on the right track, that they just built the fence too high. And I'm concerned about the ripple effect throughout the city by allowing a 6-foot fence, which really, as Councilmember Chess said, is a wall. The pictures we saw has the gate open but closed. It is a solid wall. It's not a gate that is of different height or transparency. So while public comment was closed,
Public comment has been closed, ma'am. I'm sorry.
so I have no problem reopening public comment if the council agrees. I do believe in giving everyone a chance and an opportunity to speak, but I don't think anything new is being discussed, but I'd be happy to reopen if the council agrees. Anyone object?
Fine.
Please come forward and identify yourself. No. No need to apologize.
My name is Betsy Webb. I live at 2485 Pleasant Hill Road, just a couple doors down from the place that we're talking about tonight. One clarification I want to make, it sort of started when you indicated you lived in San Francisco in the 90s and you could touch the street light. They weren't LED. Before these folks moved in, those were not LED. I look out. Why do I get nervous? I look out my front window these days and it's daylight. It's not night. The LED lights are very, very bright. And if you live on an intersection, you've got them all over the place. That's the only clarification I want to make. LED and the old fashioned kind are completely different. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Anyone else? Before I close public comment again, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council and ask for. Sure, absolutely. Please come forward. Mr. Finkus.
I'm Kevin Pincus, the owner of 2029 Westover Drive. I also wanted to, one of the last things that it wasn't able to make during my presentation was the consideration of an ordinance amendment for the city. So we can actually include all of the thoughtful responses that each of you guys had. And with that ordinance amendment would be a review of specific situations with homes that are in a certain scenario that ours are in. Because I could probably put it all in one hand. With that being said, the flood of additional requests for a similar fence would be null and void because after the ordinance amendment, it could be, our house could actually be used as an example.
Thank you.
Mayor Flaherty, there is one hand raised.
Well, okay, here, let's bring him in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Jessica Mildow. I live at 560 Maureen Lane around the corner. I just wanted to point out that the LED lights go on and off consistently through the night. When I'm driving down, they'll go off while I'm driving and then they'll come back on. I think that's definitely part of the new, structure of the street. And I imagine that adds to the lighting as well. I don't know if anyone has ever noticed that. But I imagine if it disrupts me while driving, it's probably going to disrupt the people around as well. So I just wanted to point out that they turn off and then they turn on. They're not even a consistent on to deal with. So just sharing.
Thank you for that information.
No problem.
Just going to ask staff if there's a response. Are the LED lights on Pleasant Hill Road motion censored of some sort, or?
Mayor Flaherty, this is Andrew again. I believe we have representatives from our engineering division on Zoom right now that might be able to speak to that situation.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting to jump in right now, but these LED lights are not on motion sensors. They should be working throughout the night unless there are some issues or there is some heating happening at the light. It might shut down temporarily, but it shouldn't be coming on and off.
So is there a way to determine whether that is happening? Or so can
Yes,
you?
we can definitely look into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since we have on it then.
Since we
can
have
I
on
ask
it
him a
then,
question?
can I ask him a question? Sure.
Yes, I'm here. Devan. Can you hear me?
Jonathan.
All right, any other,
I have a question.
sure.
Like a.
Well, I'm going to close
process
public
question.
comment at this time and bring it back to the council.
So, as the council votes on this, can they vote with and provide possible direction back to staff on this, or is it just an up or down vote?
I think you can vote and say whatever you want.
All right.
You can certainly provide direction that you feel that this should be looked at or that should be looked at, et cetera. Yeah.
So, anyone want to make a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion, but
Yeah,
it's
the-
going to be,
Yeah,
I'll make the motion to approve the appeal.
If I may, so we have a resolution in the packet to uphold the decision of the planning commission to deny the appeal. So when we hit this type of situation, if you want to make a motion that's different from the resolution that's in your packet, what you need to do is make a motion to give direction to staff to continue the item to the next meeting, bring it back with a different resolution and make findings for that resolution.
Okay, that
So
would
we
be,
won't,
that would be my
we won't have a
motion.
final decision
I'm not
tonight.
repeating that, so
Okay,
I'll just go with that.
And I'll second that.
okay.
we have a motion and a second to to continue the item and direct staff to come back at our next meeting with a resolution
To approve a variance.
upholding the
And
appeal.
findings,
Or denying the appeal, upholding the appeal.
upholding.
Upholding the planning commission, I'm sorry, overturning the planning commission's decision and granting the appeal.
Gotcha. Based upon the findings articulated by the council.
With appropriate findings as articulated by the council tonight, yes.
May we have a roll call, please?
Noack,
Yes.
Rin,
Yes.
Chess,
No.
Vincent,
No.
Flaherty.
Yeah, no. I'm going to make a motion to adopt the resolution denying the appeal, upholding the decision of the planning commission as an ability to make the findings for the granting of a variance.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Noack,
No?
Rin,
No.
Chess, Vincent,
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes. All right, that's the last item we have on our agenda, so there being no further business, we'll adjourn to our next regular city council meeting scheduled for May 1, at which we will be discussing further mapping among other issues. So thank you very much for all of your time and all of your effort. Very much appreciate all of the input from the community here.